Hello people, saying me doing a spoiler review of Spider-Man No Way Home. Now you have been warned, this is a spoiler review. Anyways, let's get right into the movie. I'm going to talk about things in chronological order because I think that's the best way of tackling it. I have lots of notes, many things I want to talk about. So yeah, this might be a longer video. So strap in, you don't have to look at me if you don't want to. If you just want to listen to me, put me down, do whatever you want. Anyways, let's talk about this movie. I reviewed it, normally, and I had a really tough time recording it. I was like, how do I not talk about the things I want to talk about? What makes the movie? So let's just get right into this. The movie starts, and of course, we're having like the logos go with the haunting score and voiceover between like the end credit of the last movie, and that's in the theater. I just really felt the hype. I really felt like this is happening. Where I'm sitting down, I'm watching this movie, because in comparison, like Far From Home, its opening was not as smooth, not nearly as smooth as this one. Far From Home was like, look at this, and now look at this, and now we're here and we're here. This movie kind of it takes its time in its setup, and I really, really appreciated it that time around. And then, of course, we have everyone finds out that Peter's Spider-Man. He swoops down and gets MJ because they're about to, like, almost bombard her with stuff. And, of course, then she's like, they swing off, and then this kind of threw me off for a second, where I was kind of like, yeah, we're gonna have some weird comedy in this movie, because, like, he puts MJ down on the bridge, and then he's, like, randomly FaceTiming Ned. He's like, dude, and like, she's like, dude, I'm like, you just left her there expecting her to have perfect balance. Like, I get, yeah, like, people make mistakes like that, but it just felt there for, like, kind of like the joke, and I was like, we're diving right into this, and it just felt kind of already out of place, per se. Don't get me wrong, I love this movie, so that's just, I'm nitpicking, because this is a long review, I'm going to be doing a lot of praising anyways. So, I loved how, like, everyone instantly just snapped on Spider-Man. Everyone was just like, no more. Just by that little news clip that we've seen, it was just, like, so mind-boggling. And then, of course, they get back to the apartment, and then, it starts off with Happy and Aunt May breaking up. And then from there it goes to this really long take, and I loved it. It was it was nice seeing, like, a sense of style in filmmaking in a Marvel movie. It was really nice to see that, because it was this really long take. They go from every room in the house, and it's just constantly tilting, like almost like how The Office does it at points, and like this way, or like they're following the characters, and it had style, it had urgency, and it was really nice. And of course, there is like Peter saying, "I really want to talk about your relationship." I was like, is he trying to say that to distract them, or is he genuinely just randomly that upset about it? Even though everyone, I thought that was a little off, but whatever. And then all of a sudden it cuts to the TV. The helicopters are around his apartment, and it kind of got a little reminiscent of Iron Man 3, as they noticed on the TV first that the helicopters were around their apartment. And so, yeah. And then, of course, then we do like the full investigation stuff, and it was like, that storyline, it was like, it's there for some setups, and like kind of maybe doing a little recap of some stuff if someone's confused. Of course, Ned spills everything, which it was funny, but yet that storyline, excuse me, and storyline, it wasn't as prominent as I thought it would be, if that makes sense. It was a little punny here and there, but overall I felt like the tone was kept pretty well. And then, of course, Charlie Cox shows up as Daredevil. And that's where I knew I was with a good audience, because just by Charlie Cox, oh my god, everyone just lost it. And I have not seen the Daredevil show. I do want to watch it, though. But it was just so nice to see, knowing that I was with a good audience. So nice knowing that this is a character a lot of people love, obviously. And so seeing the hype go up like that was very, very nice. And then they fixed something that instantly, and I was just like, it was that easy to fix this whole entire time. And they said, like, well, we can't stay in this apartment. We need to get in a better living situation. Because I was always asking, I'm like, Tony Stark is giving Peter a billion-dollar suit, but yet he can't. He's not going to put him and Aunt May in a better apartment than what they are now. I'm like, I'm sure that suit that Peter had plugged in was not very energy resourceful. I'm sure it took quite a bit of power. So I was like, eh. But then we go to Happy's apartment, and then we see one of the Tony Stark arms, which is cool callback because we haven't seen those in quite a while. And usually, if it were a different movie, I kind of would have rolled my eyes at that. But since it's Happy's apartment, like I get it. And then of course, MJ and Peter have this a FaceTime call, and they're actually written pretty well. Like they have a dynamic, which isn't something like we really explored in the last movie. So to see them like talk to each other was pretty nice. Of course, they talked to each other in the last movie, but it was not nearly as strong as what it is in this movie. And then, of course, we go to school, and then it had that perfect feel between like the comedy of this weird situation and like the dread of Peter literally going to school and having everyone know. And one thing I was really looking forward to in going to this movie, I really wanted to particularly see Flash's reaction to Peter being Spider-Man, see how exactly he would adapt to that. And overall, I was pretty disappointed with the 2 or 3 scenes that he had, because I thought he was kind of funny in the last couple movies, and I thought they did an okay job with him. And so I really wanted to see him like have like the most shocking reaction to Peter being Spider-Man. And yes, we get his reaction, but it wasn't as good as I thought it would be. And he has this book, and he just wrote it in, I guess, a couple days. And I was like, why is he turning into the Indian guy from Parks and Recreation? Because he comes off more as like a loser than the cool kid now. Because I didn't like exactly the way that went. But I think this will probably be his last appearance. And then Peter gets into the school, and then he talks to the teachers, and they have like the teachers. I think they're funny. I know they're a big talking point of not being funny in Far From Home. I thought they were funny there, and I think they're funny here. Teachers are like, it's like I made this. The students made this thing for you. No. He made everything. It's like all this like kind of crappy art and like Photoshop pictures of him and Peter. It was just the funniest thing. Yeah, that was pretty funny. And then we get into something that I didn't think this movie would get into. College applications. He's trying to get into college. MJ and Ned are also trying to get into MIT. And then they do something I thought that was really well done writing. They all open their letters together. It sounds like something kids in high school would do, and it was written very well, I thought. And then, of course, they don't get in because they're friends of Peter's. He's like, okay, let me go to Doctor Strange. And then when I knew the score, that once Peter went to go see Doctor Strange, that's when I knew the score to this movie was going to be really good, because he did Doctor Strange's score really well. So I hope that maybe I hope he's doing the score for Doctor Strange too, because I think they did a really good job with that couple seconds that they had. And then this is where the writing kind of gets a little flimsy, because Strange doesn't. The writing is so right here, because he didn't really establish any rules with Peter before he starts doing the spell. It's like saying, I want a pizza, and then like going into a restaurant and saying, what basically happened in the scene was, you go into a restaurant, you say, I want a pizza, and then the guy in the restaurant takes like the most amount of cheese you've ever seen and starts putting it on there, and then you say, I don't want that much cheese, and he says, well, I already started making it. I'm not gonna, that's how it kind of was. Like, I was like, I guess, but, it was very felt there. And then, of course, Strange stops the spell, and then he yells at Peter for, not trying to at least call it MIT, which, that was funny. Another thing I liked is, he goes to, find, the person with MIT, and then, he shows up in a tux, and I was surprised he didn't point it out in the script. It was the most wrinkled thing you've ever seen. I thought that was hilarious, and they didn't put a pun to it, which I thought was really well done. They just they kind of trust the audience to recognize how wrinkled his shirt is, because I thought for sure the girl was gonna say you didn't have time to iron or something like that. But I like that they kind of had that subtle comedy like that. Like I said, Far From Home didn't have comedy that I loved. Like I said, I thought the teachers were kind of funny in Far From Home, but I thought the homecoming comedy really worked. And I think the homecoming comedy was kind of applied here. And so I thought this one was particularly funny, and I think it worked very well. And then, of course, he tries to talk to the MIT person, and then Otto Octavius shows up. And another thing is that it kind of felt kind of flimsy. They show up, but there's no rhyme or reason to where and why they show up at random places. It's so like so Otto just showed up there, where Peter happened to be. That's from kind of like, I don't know, it's like a big coincidence, I guess. So, and then also there's a scene, the lady's stuck in her car, and then she's like, I can't get out. I'm like, go on the other side of the car, crawl through the window. There's a lot better options, but, Peter's got to save someone. But I thought that, like, writing in these, like, this maybe 20-minute scene felt very flimsy to me. But that's just a nitpick, because I like, everything that I'm describing right here is still extremely entertaining. So, yeah. And then, crap, I lost where I was. Another thing I noticed with this movie was it brought back Spider-Man writing, per se. Like, with Far From Home and Homecoming, it felt more like Deadpool, like, punny things. But this kind of, like, brought the Spider-Man stuff, like, are you okay? What's wrong? Stuff like that. Also, this action sequence on the bridge was awesome. But the best thing about this sequence is, looking back on it, it's kind of light compared to the type of action sequences that we get in the latter half of the movie. Not to say this action is still a great action sequence, it's just, it does not compare to the second half and the action that's offered there. And, another thing about this scene is, like, the rules to how Otto's arms work are a little unclear, because I thought it was established in, 2004 Spider-Man that the arms control him. They tell him what to think. And so the fact that then Peter grabs a hold of his arms, and then I was like, well, now since Peter has control, he can almost tell Otto what to think. But he's still acting like a madman. So it was still a little unclear exactly, like, well, if Peter's control the arms, it's like, well, I guess it's artificial intelligence, but the suits, it was kind of confusing with the fact that he, like, absorbed the nanotech. It was a little confusing about exactly how that worked, but then Green Goblin shows up. William Dafoe is Green Goblin. They kind of tease it. You don't really see his mask. You only see that mask in those couple shots, and that's about it. But that's just a great tease for the amazing action that's offered later that we'll talk about. And then after that, after that's done, Doctor Strange does some explaining, and, like, well, you thought that blah, 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 but now all these people are coming, and it's your fault, and blah, blah. And he's like, okay, well, let me bring my friends here. Then we kind of go multiverse villain hunting, and that it was fun. It was like, I was like, yeah, it's fun. I like that, you saw in these scenes that MJ has a little bit more personality in this movie, but the thing is her character of MJ across these three movies don't feel consistent at all. You have Homecoming, and she's just different. She acts different in all three of them, so I hope they kind of stick with this version, because this is the one I like the most out of the three. So yeah. And then, of course, we find Electro and Sandman, and then Jamie Foxx is particularly funny in this movie. He acts nothing like Electro that we got in Amazing Spider-Man 2, but that's a good thing, because I don't think anyone likes Electro in Amazing Spider-Man 2. But yeah, so to get that, a different refresh on Electro, we get Sandman. They must have not been able to get the actor back, because I'm pretty sure that was in new footage that they showed at the end of him. So I'm assuming they just got a really close voice actor, because it sounded a lot like him, unless if they did get him back only for voice. I'm not sure. But yeah, this whole sequence with the electricity fight, it's not, I don't think it was as visually stunning as Amazing Spider-Man 2, but it was still pretty cool looking. Of course, we have the new, well, not really, it's not the new black suit. It's really just his suit inside out, which everyone thought it was a new suit. No, it's not. It's just his suit inside out, but it still looks pretty cool. And then, and then we kind of realize that the Lizard and the Sandman will just be full CGI the whole time. And the thing is, the Lizard looks nothing like it did before. Sandman feels a little more consistent, and yeah, they just couldn't get the actors. And some people were disappointed with that, but I don't particularly like I'm not latched to any of those characters, so I don't care. And then, of course, we have some bicker between the villains, and it's like, yeah, this is okay, like, yeah, it's funny. And then we cut to William Dafoe, and then it was like, we didn't really get, like, it just kind of cut to him, and you're like, You know how everyone in this movie kind of had an entrance where the audience goes, woohoo? It wasn't really in a way where I was like, yeah, that's William Dafoe. I was like, oh, and there's William Dafoe. Like, I don't know if it was a cinematography thing, an editing thing, but it was just like, meh. And then I just love the way they go with Goblin in this movie. Like, it really recognizes what worked about the 2002 Goblin, and it expanded on what worked about it, and it just works so well. Of course, you know, he goes looking for Peter, and then he finds Aunt May, and then he finds, you know, Peter Parker, and he's like, wait, that's not who I know. And then I'll just say, May's writing in this movie is so much better compared to the last movies. And at first I thought, like, at the beginning of the movie where she's saying goodbye to Happy, I was like, we're getting the same Aunt May that we got the last two movies. But once the movie picks up into this, and a little bit after this, I was like, this is a great Aunt May. Where was this the whole time? Because she was just 1,000% better here. There was some exposition dumps where, you know, villains are trying to figure things out. It was not nearly as bad as it was in that one scene in Far From Home, but it was still a little on the nose. And then we cut to the point where the character story is really introduced, where we get that Peter versus Doctor Strange fight. Visually amazing. But I just like how that's where we kind of kicked into, this is Peter's choice at this point. This is everything that he does after that is completely up to him, and that's where the movie just really kicks into high gear and becomes one of the best comic book movies ever made. And then, of course, I had to bring up that Goblin once again said, you know, I'm something of a scientist myself. My theater went nuts when they said that. When he said that. And I like the moral dilemma that was brought up. Like, what do you choose? Like, you could see Strange's point of view, you could see Spider-Man's point of view. So I like movies that are pretty much like that. Look at my favorite Marvel movie, well, minus this one, Civil War. Like, I love that it's basically a moral dilemma. You really can't pick a side because both sides have their faults, but both sides have what works. So yeah. And then we go to Happy's apartment, and then with the villains, and that's where the movie just gets really good. Seeing Norman and Peter work together, it's just so cool. And then they fix Otto's chip in his back. You know, it's still being brought up here almost 20 years later. And Alfred Molina, he was great in the scene where he just like kind of snapped in and out of it. And yeah. And then, you know, things start to look pretty good for where I'm like, but where's the movie going from here? And then Happy calls, and the second Happy calls, you just know something is off. You don't have any score. It's just dead quietness. And all of a sudden, I'm like, what's wrong? What's wrong? This is not feeling right. And then we get some discussion between Electro and Sandman. It doesn't feel terribly off. It's just, you know, dialogue. And then the Spidey sense goes off. And it was terrifying. You felt the danger. You felt it in the camera work, the editing, the up close, like that weird effect that it does where like it zooms into his face, but the back is like kind of going out. Like, it was perfect choice on filmmaking. I was like, where was this? The last two movies, where was this? It was just perfect. And then William Dafoe just goes full Goblin, and I was just so on edge when he was giving his little speech. I was just like, oh, what's happening? Oh God, oh no. And then it cuts to May, and she's like kind of out of her league for the situation that she was in, and I'm terrified for her. And then it breaks into this fantastic action sequence where Electro now has an arc reactor, one of the most powerful energy sources in the whole MCU. And then you get that fear, and then Goblin, his presence is just terrifying as well. Just thinking about it. And then they start fighting, and then the fight, whenever Peter was fighting Goblin, it was just, the sequence was just so good. And I don't know if it's because Willem Dafoe was like, let me do my own stunts, but like, good Lord, how much, this guy's getting old, how much can we bang this guy up? But it was like, was he actually punching him? Because it was such a raw performance where like you felt like there was this one clip where Peter's punching him, and then like he's just laughing. It's almost like the Joker, like he was like, it was just like, what a performance. And then like, on top of that, we have fantastic performances, fantastic choreography, great CGI. On top of that, one of my favorite action sequences in the whole MCU, one of my favorite Spider-Man actions and sequences. It had me on edge. It wasn't an action sequence that felt fun and light. It was an action sequence that felt heavy and real. And that's what I loved about it. And then we get down to that first floor, and they get in front of where May is. And this is where I started to get emotional, because I kind of had a general idea of where it was going, but to see May refuse to back down, Peter telling her to go, and then she's like, no, because you start to feel more of a motherly sense to Peter, rather than just what she has been the last two movies. She refuses to run away. She grabs a random thing and it's like, I'm going to fight Green Goblin if I have to. And then you see the glider come up behind her, goes to the door, it hits her. When that thing hit her, I was just like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. And then at first you think she's okay, and she gives the great power, responsibility speech, and then I was like, oh wow, they actually went there. And then I'm like, she's fine after that? And I'm like, I feel like she should be pretty hurt after. Then all of a sudden she starts to collapse. And I was like, oh god, don't put me through this now. And then, like, May's death, not because of her dying that made me emotional, it's just the payoff of it. When you see Happy show up, and he knows exactly what happened. He's just, all he wants to do is tell Peter to run, and he basically gets himself arrested. He's telling Peter to run, and Peter does not want to leave her. You see the emotion on Tom Holland's face, who just gave a fantastic performance in the scene. And I'm getting emotional thinking about this. It was just perfectly Spider-Man, and I felt more for Aunt May's death than I did Tony ever dying. And, like, it just shows you how much range, like, or understanding of events. It's hard to explain, but all I can say is that they got it right. And the score also, just in that scene, was so good. And then the scene that had me absolutely speechless, directly following the slow motion rain. You see, this is the opening to the second trailer. Peter looks devastated. All he's doing is watching the Daily Bugle trash him. He's just watched Aunt May die. He is all messed up, and then all he has with him is the stuff that Aunt May handed him to cure these villains. And then get the shots that they pulled off, even though it felt a little CG heavy, it just hit hard. It was just, oof. And the film kind of sits on that. It really does. It doesn't immediately pick up with the jokes immediately after that, which I felt like they would have done the last movie. And then, like, it was a flip of a switch. Ned starts messing with the ring, and then we see Andrew Garfield return as Spider-Man. And at first I was like, he's acting a little out of character. I don't think, particularly with Andrew Garfield, I don't think he was acting like the way he acted in his last two movies at all. And he wasn't doing a bad job here. I thought he was really funny in this movie particularly. I thought he overall, I thought he gave a very promising and strong performance. It's just, it didn't feel consistent, but once, like, I kind of got over that at first, it didn't bother me for the rest of the movie. And then, of course, after that, just immediately after that, Tobey Maguire comes out, and then I'm like, oh god, is he not going to act like himself like Garfield isn't? But no, it really feels like it picked up right where it left off. It just, like, he didn't skip a beat with the character. And it really did feel like Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man showed up. It was great to see. Immediately after, they go to find Tom Holland, and to see his friends not just immediately, like, be like, look, we found the spider people. They went up to Peter, they gave him a hug. They were upset too. It was just like, why was this missing from the previous movies? And they were all three of them were giving great performances. They were even crying over May. And it feels like not something that would have happened in the way that the last movie was written. It was just, so good. And then after that, once things, like, kind of settle down, and then, Peter has heart-to-heart with the other Spider-Mans about, like, what it's like to lose people. And then they all become the Peter Parker we all know. We all see the science side of them. And it's just so fun to see like the type of comedy that they involve with it. And it's not like the comedy where it's stupid. It's the comedy where like the type of comedy you would expect if you had 3 different Spider-Mans in one room. Like, Peter, all of them, what? They're like, Peter, Peter. They're like, what do you mean? I thought that was really funny. And then another thing also is that I thought it was a little bit of a stretch for Ned to be like, and then portals start showing up out of nowhere. It was very much a stretch and felt a little lazy, but it didn't. Like I said, the movie's so fun anyways. I was just like, whatever. But really, Ned and just all of a sudden, like, whatever. I thought it was a strange choice, but yeah. And then, of course, then immediately we get to that third act sequence. And something I was expecting that we never really got was like a in-between scene with like a couple of the villains at least. Not really necessarily stating their plan, it's just at least a little bit of like what's going on with them while all this is happening. Because it's like, okay, and then they just kind of show up at the end. And I was like, I guess. But, yeah. And then, of course, before they show up, Peter, calls for them to show up to the Statue of Liberty. And you get some great Spider-Man banter between the 3 of them. All of them are, like, just asking each other, like, these weird questions. And it's just, like, perfect. And, like, what was it? I loved it. It was, not to brag, but I was in the Avengers. The Avengers? That's great. What's that? And then, later in the sequence, he's like, Peter 1, Peter 2, and Garfield's like, Peter 3. It cracks me up because it's so self-aware. And then we get to this other scene where I was like, I wasn't too sure because Ned can't close the thing. And I was like, okay, that's really lazy. Because the way that Ned was written with the portals, I thought was very lazily written because he can't close the portal. I was like, well, he closed, like 5 minutes after, he's like, he can't close the portal. He closes it perfectly. It was a little confusing, but it was really weird. But there's this one shot once they regroup, get their plan really together, and then you get this one shot of the 3 of them running. It's like the camera's running with them. My favorite shot of the movie. It gave me so many chills. The score starts to just increase, and then they just run off the thing and swing, and then you saw all 3 of them swinging it in one shot. It was just, oh my god. And like I said, Strange returns right after that, and then Ned closes the portal like he couldn't do before. And then they start curing all these, the villains. They start curing them with whatever problems they had. Another thing that they reused the footage with Sandman and Lizard, and I felt like there could have been a little bit way to maybe at least get around that a little bit, but it was particularly, it bothered me more so with the footage that we saw of the Lizard, because the shot of Sandman I think was one shot that we saw but reversed, and then of course we have the Lizard, and it was just clearly the shot at the end of the Amazing Spider-Man, and it's like, it feels so cheap just to reuse footage. Yeah, I wasn't sure about that. And then, once all of them are cured, can Spider-Man come out to play? And then you see William Dafoe once again return for an amazing action sequence. Because the second William Dafoe shows up, the action sequence that we saw goes from good enough to fantastic. And then, of course, Goblin starts throwing all the, basically the Goblin grenades at them. And then MJ falls, and then my theater exploded, and like Tom's gonna go catch her, and then Glider runs into Holland, and then the next thing you see is Andrew running and going to grab her, and it's just like, yes, and he catches her, and then you see it all in his face, like exactly what he wants to say, because Andrew Garfield is just that good of an actor. And out of the 3 Spider-Man actors, I think Garfield is probably the best actor of the 3. Not my favorite Spider-Man. I still think that goes to Tobey, but I'll just say, we'll get to the ending later to this movie, but this movie ends on such a note of promise. I feel like Holland could be my new favorite Spider-Man if they just get it right in this next trilogy, like they did perfectly with his ending. So yeah, and then anyways, like once Andrew catches MJ, we realize that one of the grenades landed within the spell, and then the spell breaks loose, and my theater just gasped when that happened. My theater was like, oh my god. And then, we have this Peter and Goblin fight, and I thought this was a top-tier Spider-Man scene, top-tier fight scene in the MCU. The choreography was good, the CG was good, it was hand-to-hand, it felt brutal, and then I was like, what am I watching? When you see the camera work that is on display, when Peter picks up the glider and gets ready to literally kill Goblin, the camera work there just blew my mind. I was like, these are the people that made Far From Home, and I don't want to sound like I'm trashing Far From Home in this review. I like the movie, I think it's entertaining, but it's not my favorite. And then, you know, he goes to kill, he goes to kill Goblin, and then Toby goes in and stops the glider. And then, that just gave me so many chills, one of my favorite moments of the movie, and he's just like, all he does is give Peter a look, and you see it all within their faces. It's just perfect. Then Toby's stabbed. And then that's another thing it felt unnecessary to me. It's just there for shock value to go, oh my god, Toby was stabbed. Because he's fine. Just there for shock value. Felt unnecessary. The movie wouldn't have been any better or worse without it. I just felt like it was just there to make the audience go, so, like how Tony was stabbed at the end of Infinity War. I was like, oh, I guess Tony's dead. Or not. Okay. But it just felt a little unnecessary. And then, of course, after that, once he's stabbed, Holland freaks out, and then Garfield throws him the cures Goblin. And it was so cool to see, basically, after 20 years after, the first Spider-Man movie was released, and see this, almost his arc completed all this time later. It was just so awesome. And then, of course, Willem Dafoe just kind of instantly snaps back into Norman Osborn. It's so good. And then, of course, Peter goes up to Strange, and he's like, we're kind of in a pickle here, Peter. And then Peter makes a bold choice. It's such a Spider-Man choice. And they just make everyone forget who I am. And I'll touch on to more what I love about this choice anyways. But it's bold, it brings emotion, it gives that Spider-Man feel, the sacrifice, and it's fantastic. And then you have this even touching dialogue between Strange and Peter where, you feel the emotion with Benedict Cumberbatch. He's great in this movie still. And then you have the most heartbreaking scenes probably when saying goodbye to MJ and Ned. All three of the actors were on their A game here, and the score just hit so hard. And then immediately, we cut to a little bit later, and then no one knows who Peter is anymore. And then he goes to the coffee shop, and it was the most heartbreaking, most emotional Spider-Man scene I think I might have ever seen. You felt the emotion, and let me get into why I think this ending works, and it almost tops off this trilogy in a perfect way, because it gets me emotional even thinking about it. Because, this scene was like how 2002 Spider-Man, he rejects MJ at the end, and he's like, this is my gift, my curse, and it's that, don't get me started on Spider-Man 2002, because I still love that movie. Yeah, and then it cuts to on May's grave, and then Happy's there, and it's not just there for giggles, and then I thought for sure he was gonna cause a chuckle in the audience. I would have rolled my eyes, but it didn't. He's like, how'd you know Spider-Man? And then he's like, how'd you know May? And he's like, through Spider-Man. And then I totally thought Happy was gonna smile, and he's like, I knew her through a summer flea, or whatever, fling as they called it. I was like, oh god, please don't. I really thought they were gonna say that, but he's like, yeah, me too. I was like, did we just do that? Did we just have a really great scene where no comedy? And of course, this movie did that before, but I thought, the movie's about to end. I was like, maybe they're gonna do it one last time, like most of these movies do. So I was really impressed that they're not trying to just dabble a couple laughs before the end, which I was very happy that they did. And then I started thinking about it in the theater. I was like, no one knows that he's Spider-Man, but I was thinking about it. I was like, well, May and Tony remember. Of course, because they're not living anymore, but it's just heartbreaking to know that the only people that will remember this are the people that he's lost. Because, of course, it depends on how you view when people die. views depends on your religion, I guess. But you know, like just thinking about that on a deeper level, it just hurts. And it's perfect Spider-Man though. And you know, I don't want to sound like a negative person, but you know, the Spider-Man is almost all about hurt and pain and trying to get through it, trying to go from day to day. And yeah, then we cut to the most perfect ending of all time. Probably my most favorite ending in any Spider-Man comic book movie, maybe even movie. Because then you cut to him going into a crappy apartment, attention to detail, and sorry, you cut to this shot of Peter looking out his window. You see the Spider-Man mask on his bed, and it cuts to the shot where you see a little Palpatine Lego and the cup from the coffee shop, and it says thanks for, it says something like nice serving you or something like that, and oof. And then we get to that last swing, and it's the perfect big apple. It's nighttime, it's snowing, we're back in like the most perfect Spider-Man suit I've ever seen in my life. And and then it cuts to like that John Watts ending with the mask right into it. It was just so perfect. And yeah, and the score just defined itself in that very last scene. And while this movie kind of had a little bit of a rough start, this movie ended being one of my favorite comic book movies of all time. And what I mean by rough start, that means a rough start compared to the rest of the movie. Like, the first half of this movie is still like an 8.5 out of 10 for me. I still think it's a really fun time. And then the second half is like easily one of the best movies I've ever seen. And I said this, and I know it's true. If the first half was just as strong as the second half of this movie, this would probably be my all-time favorite movie. And I don't want to say that just to exaggerate or build hype. I really do feel that way. And I really 100% feel that way. And because this movie just brought the emotion, it's easily the most emotional I've ever been watching a Spider-Man movie. And the best part about this movie, I've been saving this last little detail for last. This movie made Homecoming and Far From Home even better. And hear me out when I say this, because now, sorry, I have dog hair all over my arm, but because now, whenever Peter loses something, particularly like Spider-Man, the first Spider-Man movie, you know, it picks up where basically, well, Uncle Ben dies and then he becomes Spider-Man. It's not like we had a lot of time with Uncle Ben. This series took 2 movies to make us feel the weight and make us understand exactly of what he's letting go at the end of this. Because if this was his introductory movie, like, because this is like the first introduction to Spider-Man, minus, you know, not Iron Boy Jr., as he's been like in the last couple of movies. So this was the introduction to Spider-Man, and it just blew my mind, because what makes it so heartbreaking is that we see these 2 movies between MJ and Ned, and they just, and all that is on a blank slate. And it's not like a complaint. I think it's really well done and justifiable to do what they did. But you see all these good times Peter had, and people were complaining, oh, he's being an idiot here, idiot there. But now it's more so, yes, like, he's on a clean slate now. Now he's learned from those things. Now he knows with great power comes great responsibility. And he has to be careful with these choices, because he's learned these lessons from these last 2 movies. And seeing him learn these lessons in these last 2 movies, and you see these scenes where, you know, scenes with him and Ned particularly, and even Aunt May, and Happy, and it just makes it 10 times more heartbreaking, because you know what he's sacrificed. You know what he lost by the end of this movie. You understand. You understand it 10 times more. If this was like the first Spider-Man movie, if this was his introduction, it would be sad, yeah, but not as heartbreaking as it is now seeing those first 2 films. So I really think it did a lot of justification to, you know, the first 2 movies and some of my problems with that. So this movie did exactly what I thought it should have done. Like, of course, some lazy setups, but at the same time, it's a comic book movie. I'm not expecting perfect writing. It got me to where I wanted the movie to go. It's one of my favorite comic book movies of all time, easily top 3. easily my favorite movie of this year so far, and I love it. Yeah, anyways, that's my spoiler review to Spider-Man No Way Home. I really want to get all this off my chest. It's my favorite Spider-Man movie, and I really, I love the Raimi movies. My God, I love the Raimi movies. And for me to say this is my favorite Spider-Man movie, this movie did, it impressed me in almost every way. It really did. So, yeah. Anyways, comment down below what you guys thought. Spoiler comments if you guys want, because it's a spoiler review. So, yeah. Anyways, like, share, subscribe, and stuff like that, and adios.